Hey there, welcome to my first official figure review video ever. My name is Derek, but in certain nooks and crannies on the web, I'm also known as Foregreen, specifically on DeviantArt, where I showcase my Godzilla-themed artwork. Aside from illustration, I'm also an avid collector of primarily action figures and comics like any modern-day bleak or geek or nerd. And one of my obsessions is the focus of this first and in a hopeful series of videos, Godzilla Bandai vinyl figures, specifically the Movie Monster series and a few Playmates offerings as well. So I decided I would share my views on certain Bandai and Playmate vinyls, specifically Kaiju from the Showa era, which encompasses the Toho Kaiju films from 1954 to 1975. I've collected Bandai vinyls since the early 90s, right around the time 1993's Godzilla vs. Mothra was released. And while I accumulated a sizable amount of these 8-inch Kaiju replicas, I went on hiatus for a good part of most of the post-millennium era. But recently Bandai has been knocking it out of the park with these smaller 6-inch goods, with sculpting reaching new levels of holy shit, that's awesome. Today's review is no exception, as this piece has been something of a big want of mine, Godzilla 1955, otherwise known as Gyakushu Gojira, and from the movie Godzilla's Counterattack, aka Godzilla Raids Again, aka Gigantus the Fire Monster. So I hope you'll join me and check out my review. Now, before I start, I want to talk a little bit about that film, and specifically my fascination for it. Most fans of the Toho Kaiju series of movies disregard this film kind of as a rushed, inferior sequel to the 1954 original masterpiece, and in large part, it is. In fact, compared to the heavy message of the original, Raids Again is pretty underwhelming. With its underlying theme of rebuilding and supposed Cold War symbolism, it's not as engaging as the atomic allegory of the former. But I will say this has been a movie I held with fascination for several years, almost a Lost Godzilla film of sorts. As a kid, I used to rent from my library the famous Ian Thorne Godzilla book, where it covered this movie. But I never saw it on any creature double features, and it eluded me into my young adulthood. The film is something of a red-headed stepchild. With its sped-up monster action filmed in black and white, it's hard to sell on my 9-year-old self. But as an adult, I can appreciate what was attempted. In fact, I was so fascinated by Godzilla Raids Again, it was the subject of my very first published artwork, the wraparound cover of G-Fan number 57. I love the kaiju designs of this movie. Both Godzilla and the newcomer first rival Anguirus display a crazy feral nature to their overall aesthetic, and Bandai gave us a great Christmas gift in 2023, releasing both renditions of their Movie Monster line. But for this video, I wanted to specifically focus on Gojira himself, so let's begin. Godzilla 55 was originally released as a 50th anniversary box set figure, and figures you'd have to shell a shitload out for on the aftermarket. I wouldn't call it a grail of mine, but I've always had it in my radar. While I never acquired it, finally having this 2023 edition was worth the years-long wait. From what I could see on the other reviews, the image comparisons, there are subtle differences such as how the legs are positioned, the arms, the bony hands, and of course the notorious dorsal fin debacle being fixed. You see, the OG Gigantus from the 50th anniversary box set vinyl had its back plates set upside down. It was probably the one thing that gave me pause to purchase this figure on the aftermarket. So with great relief, the Movie Monster series rights this wrong. Thank bejesus. Now, you'll notice that I have my tag still affixed to this figure. I'm not one who keeps tags on my figures. Sacrilege, I know. But I don't like things obstructing my view and appreciation for a showpiece that I may mess with on occasion. I save the tags, but I don't leave them on. They don't stay on, usually. Therefore, I won't really give the tags much attention, so don't judge me, don't at me. The new sculpture retains the slim stature of the 55 costume. The reason was the suit looked so malnourished was to help the suit act move with agility while fighting Anguirus. Another cool feature of the movie suit, and not this Bandai figure, more on that later, was that the head and eyes could move from side to side, which, for whatever reason, was never utilized again in the Showa era or any outside of the CGI renditions. The head sculpt is pretty nice, although I must admit that one of the big identifiers with this particular version of Godzilla is the super pronounced fangs, the strange upturned nose, and the creepy eyes. I mean, look at that mug, especially from the front. Dude looks like a stuck-up vampire who drinks blood from a box. I almost wish Bandai would have given this guy an open mouth, but, beggars. Another detail I wanted to point out is the kudos to the sculptor who made this, that the figure included the neck wrinkles that are sometimes seen on the movie promo stills. They almost look like gills or claw scars to me, so I really dig that this is showcased. And the feet have great detail, with like 4 toes, one which is not as pronounced, just like the 54 suit in the figure, but more on that later. The arms seem generic in the posturing position, but when you move them a bit, and especially feed one of the arms to 55 Anguirus' toothy maw, you appreciate it. It's also nice to have Godzilla whose arms don't feel useless in a fight, like some of the more modern takes where they're kind of closely tucked towards his torso. The tail is nice, and it's lengthy, and isn't any super dynamic pose, it's just fairly drawn out and nicely ornate. The vinyl base color is sort of a charcoal gray, but not like the original 6-inch 54 version. Here the gray is lighter with greenish brown hue, basically like diarrhea tint. No, the more I look at it, it's more like a dark ash gray. And breaking up that dominating color are sprays of lighter, let's just say a light ash on the torso, dorsal plates, knees, toes, fingers, and head. His teeth are coated in a toothy white, which is fine. Even if any detail is washed away, his eyes have that soulless stare, just like his movie counterpart. Fucking creeper. There's really nothing special going on here in terms of articulation. The two big detractors to Bandai's movie monster series usually falls under the 2 Ps, posability and paint. There's never enough of both. While in this case the paint job works, harkening back to the black and white film from which it derived, the articulation on what I would argue is the most agile Godzilla man in suit of the series is pretty lackluster. I mean, both arms give you full rotation, as well as the legs. And the one time I would argue that his head would have needed a neck joint or a swivel or something to mimic the feats of that suit. That would have been nice. Again, beggars. Can't have nice things. So right off, I'm not one of those reviewers who will compare these figures with something unrelated. Yeah, it's like a kind of a minor pet peeve of mine. When I watch other reviewers and somebody's like, here's Godzilla next to Rainbow High Doll. I understand the need to or desire to see how big a figure is, to say like a Coke can. But for me personally, I just prefer to see how it displays with similar items that, might be displayed together in a collection or a theme. So for this review, I am choosing Godzilla 1954. And as you can see here, and as was stated before, 55 Goji is considerably slimmer than his previous incarnation. I think the suit looks even more so on film, but Bandai captured the differences wonderfully. Head sculpts really display how distinct those two are, and it makes this so worth having on the shelf. It's far more distinct to me, as opposed to having Goji 73 through 75, even if there are differences in sculpts regarding positioning. I still kind of look at all their head sculpts, and they're so vaguely different. Also, you can see the charcoal gray differences between the two. 54 appears more of a tar gray by comparison to the ash gray of 55. And just a very dope display pairing these two cinematic versions next to each other on a shelf. I'm also going to pull out Anguirus 55, which is a no-brainer since it's kind of a set. I mean, you can have one without the other, but aside from maybe just collecting only Godzilla's suits, why would you not? I remember there was some concern over Anguirus' size in some of the promo shots versus Godzilla's. In my opinion, I think he scales well. I want to say that we are thrown off on how long Anguirus' tail is, giving the impression of a greater scale. But if you line the main bodies up with one another, you can see a very similar body size. One thing that I find fascinating with the two is that the choice of paint inside Anguirus' mouth is vibrant maroon. It kind of throws out the idea that these two are colored to reflect the black and white film used. Another observation also is that Angie appears to be way more detailed than his on-screen rival. His scales, spikes, and bumps are way more defined when compared to Godzilla's subtle keloid skin. If we're looking at building on an early Showa display, I'm going to throw in Playmates 56 Rodan and Varan. I'll throw these two guys in for a good measure. Really nothing to compare except for scale with one another. Varan, like Anguirus, seems massive, but again, I think that's more of a length of tail matter mostly. Maybe. I mean, Varan does look like he could dominate 55. So that's really my review for Godzilla 55. I hope you all enjoyed my perspective of this fantastic rendition. All in all, if I were to use a grading system, I would use the Jet Jaguar punch system, with 6 punches being the best. Thus, I'd probably give this punch, 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 punch. 5 Jet Jaguar punches. A lesser regarded suit design with some great details and display value, its shortcomings fall with a barely basic articulation, mostly the missed opportunity to give this a head or neck swivel, and its soft detailing, especially when compared to his wave-mate Anguirus. The paint apps work for this release, as the monotone grays reflect out of the film it's derived from nicely. If you collect anything Godzilla, I have no doubt you'll already have purchased this, but if you're a selective collector, it's hard to see this as something to pursue unless you have like a specific theme, such as every Godzilla suit design or a complete Showa era set. For me personally, this was high on the list, as I'm a fan of this lean and agile vampiric version of the King of the Monsters, making him one of my favorite suit designs. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more of my vinyl views, please do me the honor of liking this video, subscribing to this channel, and sharing this with other enthusiasts. Those simple actions alone will help me reach a wider audience and connect us collectors and Godzilla fans and produce more content. I do have a review for the other vinyls featured in the comparison segment of this video, as well as several others planned, so I hope you stay tuned. Thank you for watching.